And good afternoon, everybody. Week 4 of our seminar series, The Golden Thread, A Journey Through the Word of God. This week we'll be covering off the judges and kings of Israel. So let's just have a really quick recap, and I will try to be a good steward of your time this afternoon. We looked at the very beginning. God is one. He is eternal, everlasting, always has been, always will be. He's a God of goodness and severity. He wants the world to be filled with his glory. And remember in the timeline we talked about his mission statement in Numbers 14:21, as truly as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord. Unfortunately, in the garden, everything was very good and in harmony, and it was man and women that stepped away from God, and we've been disconnected, and we've had sin nature in the world and suffering and death because of it ever since. We looked at an awesome promise at the very beginning in Genesis 3:15, and another great one to Abraham with some wonderful promises. And they were about land, his name, the people, but most importantly, that all the nations will be blessed through Abraham. And then we jumped forward into Galatians 3:16, and we looked at how that was absolutely talking about Jesus Christ. We can become heirs to the promise through Christ, and once again, Galatians 3:27 to 29 this time tells us how that happens, and that's through baptism into Jesus Christ. So pretty awesome. And we looked forward into Hebrews 11 as well, and we saw that all these, having a faithful report, did not receive the promises, meaning that all the faithful of old would absolutely be raised. And there's lots of scriptural verses that we'll look at in week 8 about the resurrection. And quick summary last week, I wasn't here unfortunately, but I was told Graham did an awesome job about Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, the 12 tribes. We looked at the story of Joseph and the parallels there with Jesus Christ. Moses' deliverance from Egypt. So Moses is an awesome story of 3 parts of 40 years. So 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in the wilderness, and then the 40 years going through the wilderness after the Exodus. And how Israel was given a law, and that law was the law of Moses that we refer to, that was given at Mount Sinai, and really guided the people about what they should and shouldn't be doing. And that was lead them to Christ. And Christ talked about that law as the schoolmaster that brought it forward to his law. At the end of the 40 years wandering in the wilderness, they entered the promised land under Joshua and Caleb, which brings us to today where we are today. So once again, just a quick recap on the timeline. This timeline really just builds the previous 6,000 years of time leading up to the next 1,000 years of rest, which is the future kingdom on this earth. The golden thread theme of the seminar series looks at this thread of Jesus Christ, the seed, which is the blue line. But we also highlight the seed of the serpent from Genesis 3:15, which is sin and death, and also any references to the kingdom, being earth and the kingdom, which is the green line. So lots of different references throughout the timeline that we've been building. Like I said, time-wise, we're just, as the people were entering the land of Israel, they've just exited the wilderness wanderings for 40 years, so a whole generation is now being born and is really keen to serve God and really keen to take on the land as the promised land. Time-wise, we're talking about 1400 BC, so before Christ, as you see on that timeline. So yeah, that's where we sit in the course outline. So session 4, what will we be covering today? We'll be looking at the judges, roughly a 400-year period. Saul, the first king, David, and the third great promise. So the first one being Genesis 3:15, second one being the promises to Abraham in Genesis 12, 13, and 15. We'll look at Solomon, given wisdom, built the temple, look at how the kingdom was divided. So when we read in our Bibles, the northern tribes of Israel and the southern tribe of Judah with Benjamin, that's what we're talking about. Prophets, encouragements and warnings. So what did the prophets do? Why were they sent from God? And then we'll finish with the captivity of Israel. Not Judah just yet, that'll be next week, but we'll have a look at that captivity from the Assyrians. So quite a lot to get through today. Like I said, I'll do my best to be a good steward of your time. This is the separation of how the tribes settle. So like I said, the people under Joshua's leadership went and conquered the land, and God said, wipe everyone out that's there. So absolutely wipe the slate clean and start afresh. The reason for that is there was a lot of evil practices. Some of the practices were burning their children alive to Baal, and so that was abhorrent to God. And God said, get in there, wipe the slate clean. Of course, they didn't listen fully. They left remnants of those people and those practices, and that has come back and have bit them for the next couple of hundred years, as we'll see the story play out. So yeah, you can see all the different lands there. Now, Joshua dies, and there's no leader in Israel, a physical human leader. The Bible makes it clear that God was their king and their leader, but the people didn't have a human person keeping them in check. And so Judges 17 verse 6 tells us that everyone did what was right in his own eyes. There's a bit of an echo there, isn't it, to pre-flood, where the people were marrying, giving in marriage, just doing whatever they wanted. And they started to sin, and that sin led to God once again wiping the slate clean with the flood and starting again with Noah's family. So it's not a good situation. There's no human leader, and the people are sinning. They're performing practices that are abhorrent to God. And so this is what is being coined the 4 S's of the period of the Judges. The first S is the sin. This is an upside down bell curve. The next one is suffering. So they suffered as a result of their sin. So God often sent, as a consequence or a judgment, other nations to come and attack them. So they suffered. That suffering brought them to call on God once again. And so they sought God and seeking, and then God sent a judge, and then they were saved. They found salvation when they turned back to God and started to do his will. So the 4 S's. So these are some of the judges. We're not going to go into detail. Some of them there was roughly 12 main judges. Some of them are called out there, the big ones. Othniel was a warrior judge. Ehud was the left-handed guy that assassinated King Elog. Shamgar, I think, slew 600 Philistines just with a farming implement. We know Deborah was a female judge, which is great. Gideon, obviously, he lacked a bit of faith initially with the fleece, but then garnered 300 men, very small company, and overtook a whole army. Jephthah's best known for making the vow, and his daughter suffered because of that vow. Samson, everyone knows Samson, my boys know Samson, love that story. But that's a story of, once again, someone that was weak and was led away from our sin nature, and it took a very humbling event to bring Samson back to God. And we finish with Samuel as one of the last great judges. So this is just a really quick picture of the amount of invading armies that were coming in. From the top, from the left, from the right, east, west, south, they were being attacked from all sides because they didn't do what God instructed them to do. And we often find this in life, don't we? If we don't follow God's laws, there are consequences, and they certainly found out the consequences of not following God's instruction. So Samuel, like I said, was the last judge. So Samuel was born from Hannah. Hannah was barren. She prayed to God for a son and said she would dedicate that son to God if that prayer was answered. And so Samuel was born, and she followed through with that vow. And so Samuel started service with Eli at a very young age in the temple or tabernacle, and really grew up under the instruction of Eli the priest, and became one of the most famous judges. So Hebrews 11 verse 32 verse 33 records Samuel's faithfulness is attested in Hebrews. What more shall I say? I do not have time to tell you about Samuel, who through faith administered justice and gained what was promised. So pretty awesome record left in the New Testament in Hebrews. So to put the judges, the 400 years, like some say it's less, some say it's more. I'm just saying roughly 400 years of judges in our timeline. So leading up to 1000 BC, where we go into what we call the period of the kings, which we'll be covering off today as well. So brings us to the first king, which is Saul. I like that picture. It's sort of brooding. It's kind of dark. Kind of reminds me of how Saul's portrayed in the Old Testament. And so Saul was king from about 1051 to basically 1000 BC. And so the people looked around. Once again, at this time, they didn't have a human leader or a human king. Samuel was the judge at the time. And they wanted to be like the other nations. You know, they saw these big, strong kings leading their armies into battle, and they said, we want to be like that. They came to Samuel with the petition. Samuel was really upset, understandably. And God said, no, Samuel, it's not you that they've rejected, it's actually me as their king. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 6 to 7 says, but the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. And so Samuel even warned them, if you get a king, he's going to take your sons and put them in the armies. He's going to take your daughters, get them to work as servants. And they said, no, we still really want this. And so God gave them exactly what they asked for. They gave them Saul, a big, strong, handsome fella, stood above everyone else, could lead them into the battles, but was fundamentally weak. I don't know if it was covered in last week when we talk about Israel and the 12 tribes, but when Israel was end of days, when he was about to die, he blessed his sons, and he gave sort of prophecies about what each son was going to be known for. And the tribe of Judah was listed as that was going to be the tribe that the line of the king would come from. And so, who can tell me what line or what tribe Saul came from? Benjamin, not Judah, right? So straight away there's a, hang on, red flag here. This isn't quite right. But Saul came from the tribe of Benjamin and was selected by the people. And he started off humble. He actually hid from his coronation. But he was weak in nature and he lacked faith in God. The first failure where Saul was rejected for his disobedience was Samuel asked him to wait to sacrifice. There was a big army, Philistine army coming. Saul didn't wait. He didn't have the faith in God that God would provide an escape for the people, and he went ahead and offered the sacrifice himself. That was the first rejection, after which the second rejection was when God said, destroy the Amalekites, every single one of them. They're evil, and Saul only partially did that. So two major rejections, and basically through Samuel, God told Saul that I'll no longer be with you, basically. And the second one was the last time Saul actually saw Samuel, so they didn't actually see each other again. And Samuel was quite a mentor to Saul, so Saul was absolutely devastated by this. And you can see it really decline quickly when God stepped away from Saul after this event. So we're moving through this quickly because we have a lot of content to get through, but we move on to a character named David. So keep in mind, Saul is still king, and then we're introduced to the house of Jesse, which is David's father. And which house do you reckon this tribe comes from? Have a guess, Judah, that's right. And so straight away, this is better, right? We're on the right track. So God chose David to be king, and he's listed as a man after God's own heart. That's really insightful because, so we look at David's character as, you know, starting as a shepherd in the field, a lot of time to meditate, a lot of time to see God's brilliance. He was entrusted with caring for his sheep and put his life on the line for that sheep. And so all these little life lessons that he learned as a shepherd really were fundamental to his character when he grew to be the king of Israel. He was anointed by Samuel, so we know the story. Samuel came to the house of Jesse, all big, handsome sons of Jesse came forward, and God said, no, these aren't it. Where's your youngest? He was out in the field, and Samuel anointed David as king because God looked on the inward heart of David. We know the story. My boys can regale the story very well to you about David killing the Philistine, Goliath. And so that would have taken a lot of faith, and that was really fundamental in David. We're told in the Old Testament that he actually served Saul. He played the harp, and so he was in the throne room of Saul in the early days, and Saul started to get jealous of David. He experienced hardship, so we know the story where as Saul got more and more jealous of David, Saul actually tried to kill him quite a few times. Now keep in mind, David was anointed to be king, and it was roughly 15 years between the time he was anointed king and the time he actually became king of Judah. I think it could have been 21 years before he became king over all of Israel. That's a long time. When we wait for things, when we ask for things in prayer, and sometimes our prayers seem unanswered, sometimes the answer is different to what we'd like, 15 years, 20 years, that's a very long time to wait for something that was promised to you. But David had faith, and he didn't take it into his own hands to bring about him being king over Israel. So a lot of hardships, but through those hardships, he developed a lot of good character that later played out to make him a very good king of Israel. He was a warrior king, so he would go out to battle and fight with the people, to the point where, as you start to get old, they had to say, hey, come on, get behind the front line, please. The interesting story about David, so keep in mind, he's listed as a man after God's own heart. He was still human. And he failed in a big way. He committed adultery, and he committed basically effective murder. So he committed adultery with Bathsheba and effectively had Uriah killed, which is murderous. Initially he didn't realise he was wrong until the prophets gave him a parable about a rich man and a little lamb, and it was only then that he realised his sin and that he repented. And God forgave him. There were still consequences. One of the consequences, which we'll see played out in his life, is that the sword would not depart from his house. And we see that with all his children. The amount of atrocities, which we don't have time to go into, it's not pleasant, that happened with his children, was really hard for him. And that was a result of that sin. But we are told that he was forgiven. This is an artist's depiction of the city of David. So there's lots of these ones, they're all slightly different. What I like about this one is it brings into focus Mount Moriah. So remember the story of Abraham and Isaac, where they went to Mount Moriah and Abraham went to offer Isaac as instructed by God, but God intervened. It just gives that perspective, quite amazing perspective about where that was situated to Jerusalem. And when later we'll see when Solomon builds north, builds on top of that mountain, and that's where the temple ends up being. And that's where the Dome of the Rock is today, Mount Moriah, where Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac, and where Solomon's original temple was. So pretty incredible history around this area. And the reason why they're still fighting over it today is because both Arab people and Jewish people trace their ancestry back to Abraham. If you remember Ishmael and Isaac coming from Abraham. So they believe the promises to Abraham are they're entitled to them, and hence the land that was promised, which is obviously centered in Jerusalem. So yeah, really cool artist depiction of, what that area could have looked like back then. We obviously don't know. We don't have GPS and Google Earth to verify what that actually looked like. That's just an artist's impression. So I talked about the three great promises. So the third great promise made to Abraham is 2 Samuel 7, verse 11 to 16. And I'm going to read it out, and we'll go through it together, just really quickly. And as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies, also the Lord telleth thee that he will make thee an house. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I'll set up thy seed in blue after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I'll establish his kingdom. He shall build an house for my name, and will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I'll be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever. Before thee and thy throne shall be established forever. So you see some colour coding there. And so this is the golden thread that we keep talking about, linking back to those lines in our timeline. So really key themes and echoes, bubble echoes, and golden thread coming through. So in summary, in regards to why do we call this the third great promise? There's three major ones in the Old Testament. This is really about the kingship of Jesus Christ. So the seed provided after David's death. Now you could say, oh, that was Solomon. Solomon built a house, the temple. Solomon was blessed by God. It even says God loved Solomon. But there was further prophecies about forever, about something happening in the future. Seed to set up a house of prayer. And God would establish seed as king over David's throne forever. And that's the key one that makes us look forward to the future. God would be the seed's father. Okay, so this is building. And would not reject him as he did Saul. Kingdom to be established forever. And David would be alive when this promise was fulfilled. So once again, we go to Hebrews 11 and we look at that statement where basically these have all died and they have not received the promises, which is pretty interesting given that if you believe heaven is your promise, if you believe heaven is your reward, then David and Abraham and all those have received their reward. They're in heaven, right? But no, it's something that's going to happen in the future that is yet to take place. The New Testament, once again, just wraps this up really beautifully. It leaves us in little doubt around who this seed, referencing David's seed, is. In Luke 1:31, it says, "Behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb," so this is an angel talking to Mary, "and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. He shall be great and shall be called the Son of the Highest." So once again, there's that son piece. "And the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David." No doubt. "And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end." So Acts 13 verse 22 also says, "And when he had removed him, he raised up unto them David to be their king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David the son of Jesse, a man after mine own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. And of this man's seed hath God, according to his promise, raised unto Jesus, Israel, a saviour in Jesus." And then at the end of Acts 2, verse 29 to 30, "And he would raise up Christ to sit on his throne." So it just ties it all really well, beautifully, using very similar language from 2 Samuel 7, and just tying that all together for us. So like I said, this is the verse I've been referencing a couple of times. I was obviously getting ahead of myself, but I love this idea where this leaves us in little doubt that the reward is yet to come, and that even though they all did receive a good report, that's all the patriarchs and the faithful of old, that's listed in Hebrews 11, have not received the promise. And we know God is not slack concerning his promises, so we know to receive those, they have to be raised. It's incredible promise that we have. And to finish off the first half of the session, to populate the timeline before we go for a break, we have obviously King Saul, King David. It's roughly in those timelines. And then we had the third great promise, clearly linking to Jesus Christ, but also really strong linkages to the kingdom and the earth being forever. Cool. Now's the time for a quick break for those that would like a break. We'll try and keep it quick, 3 or 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene. Thank you. Alrighty. So we'll kick off again. Thanks everyone for making that break brief. We will continue to work through. So David's getting old. He's no longer on the front lines. He's getting to the point near death. And so he realises he has to pass on who is going to take on the throne, and Solomon is chosen. Solomon is chosen by God as well to sit on the throne. First Chronicles 28 verse 5, "Of all my sons, and the Lord has given me many, he has chosen my son Solomon to sit on the throne of the kingdom of the Lord over Israel." So Solomon's mother was Bathsheba. So God gave Solomon wisdom. We know the story where God said, "You are now king over my people. What can I give you? What do you need?" And Solomon's response was, "Your people are so great. Give me wisdom to manage your people." And God said, that's a great response. Not only are we going to give you that, you're going to have everything else. You're going to have riches and fame as well. And so Solomon was considered one of the wisest people to ever walk the earth. He reign lasted for 40 years, so time period wise, we're talking about 970 BC to 931. It was a period of peace and prosperity. So David really, as we saw in that picture, David was living in a palace, and he looked at the tabernacle where God's light resided, and he said, "I want to build you a temple, Lord." And the Lord said, "No, you're a man of war, you're a man of blood. That's not actually representative of who I am. Your son will build me a temple. He will be a man of peace." And that gives us some insights into how God sees himself in regards to a peaceful and loving God. So Solomon did build the temple. David had everything prepared as much as he could, and Solomon actually physically built it on the top of that mountain that we saw. He was extremely wise and wealthy. People travelled, Queen of Sheba travelled, and to visit and to hear of his wisdom. Solomon's known for writing the Proverbs, Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon, some really beautiful themes there. So imagine the smartest person on the earth and living or reigning for 40 years as king and having all the resources at his disposal. And so he had a lot of time to just pursue anything he wanted to do was blessed. And so he built big structures, he had all the things, and he had hundreds and hundreds of wives, which he was told not to do. And at the end of it, he's just reflected on that and goes, it's all vanity, it's all vain, it's all useless. Actually, what's important is to fear God and serve him with all our heart and mind. So those Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, just bring that out so beautifully. Like I said, he had lots of wives. I struggled with just one, sorry, Rach. But he had so many wives. And it led him astray, ultimately, as did the chariots and all the wealth. He didn't end his life very well. He served other gods, and it wasn't a great finish for a man. But once again, this theme of sin and death just creeps into even people as wise and as smart as Solomon. We're all affected by it, no matter how smart we are. It all affects us in different ways. So this is a very basic artist's impression of Solomon building to the north, and you see the temple there. So once again, this is an artist's impression of what the temple could have looked like. It was basically framed after the tabernacle, so all the same things that you see in the tabernacle, where the bronze altar, the sea, you've got the most holy place with the showbread and the incense and the lampstand, and then you've got the most holy with the Ark of the Covenant there, where the priests entered once a year. So very similar layout, but each detail, each measurement, each material used was very significant in the tabernacle, and that was passed on to the temple as well. So God loves symbols. He really invests heavily in types and these golden threads throughout all the Bible. A lot of linkages as well throughout the Bible when it comes to what was important to God. Just really quickly, thought I'd touch base on Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was actually a very special city. It was special in God's eyes. God actually intentionally chose it. Read that in 1 Kings 11 verse 32. Jerusalem, the city I have chosen. And when David started being king after Saul, they actually didn't have Jerusalem as a major city. I'm not sure where Saul was as a seat of power before that, but David had the Jebusites were in Jerusalem, and David conquered it and took it over as his city. Hence, it was coined the David city, Jerusalem. Now, there's a lot of future prophecies about Jerusalem. So Psalms 132, verse 13 to 14, "For the Lord hath chosen Zion, he hath desired it for his habitation. This is my rest forever, here I will dwell, for I have desired it." And there's heaps of other prophecies that talks about Jerusalem as the future capital of the world, of the future kingdom. Isaiah 2, verse 3 says, "Many people shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." And Jeremiah 3, verse 17, "At that time Jerusalem shall be called the throne of the Lord, and all the nations shall be gathered to it, to the name of the Lord, to Jerusalem. No more shall they follow the dictates of their evil hearts." So this is why it's so special to the Jewish people. This is why it's so special to Christians, because we're told clearly in plain English that it will be the future capital of the world. Okay, so Solomon, like I said, didn't finish well. He eventually dies of old age, and he passes the throne on to Rehoboam, his son. Now the people come to Rehoboam and they say, "Your father taxed us very, very heavily. We just have no money. Can you lower the taxes, please?" And Rehoboam considered that request. He got advice from his young mates. He got advice from the elders. The elders said, "Lower the taxes." The young mate said, "No, raise the taxes." He went back to the people and said, "I'm going to make it even harder for you." And the people revolted. They chose Jeroboam, well, God actually chose Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who called Israel to sin, as the king to take over Israel. So even though this played out seemingly natural by Rehoboam's decisions, God was also orchestrating things in the background and actually sent a prophet to Jeroboam to say this is what was going to happen and that he would take on the 10 tribes. So it's amazing the angels and the prophets working to bring about God's will. And so the kingdom was divided into two. The 10 northern tribes of Israel went to Jeroboam, and Judah and Benjamin went to Rehoboam. And there was a mixture of good and bad kings in the tribes of Judah, and there were all wicked kings in Israel. There's a great graphic that I'll show you shortly on that. And so it was still practiced then, once a year, to go to Jerusalem to worship, to offer sacrifices. Obviously, Jeroboam didn't want the people to do that, to go down into Judah, so he set up these golden calves. And that's why, reoccurring theme or echo in the Bible, in the Old Testament, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin. That was the sin. It was idol worship and the northern and southern idols that he set up. So it's just a bit of a graphic about the different kings in Israel and Judah. Obviously, the blue ones there were the better kings. Not all of them were perfect, but better kings on the tribe of Judah. So filling in our timeline, we talked about Jerusalem, the importance of Jerusalem as a city, talked about Solomon, and then we've got this division. So we're in two now. And how there was good and bad kings in the tribe of Judah. So we've got two separate kingdoms, and sometimes they even fought against each other. I mean, this is the same people. It would be like first cousins fighting each other. But that's the way it played out over the years. They got further and further apart. They had different belief systems, and they actually fought each other. And so God sent prophets to both kingdoms in different times, different prophets for different issues, to bring them both back to God. Sometimes Judah was on the rails, the whole time Israel was off the rails, and God was sending prophets to get them back. So we got now the period of the prophets. So this is after, Song of Solomon's. We've got the major prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Daniel. All these prophets were in this time, after this period of the division of the kingdom. They were sent to the lawless nations. They were just off the rails. We read about people like Ahab and Jezebel. The things they got up to would just curl your skin. But that was where they were at, and God was trying to bring them back. Initially, they had to prove they were prophets. So they would always give a short-term prophecy that would come true, and that showed the people that they actually was from God, and that the long-term prophecies would also come true. They were often mistreated. They were beaten. They were bashed. They were, horrific things that happened to them. But they were faithful. We read of their faithfulness in the major prophets in the Old Testament. And 2 Kings 17 verse 13 expresses God's mercy. The Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers, turn from your evil ways, observe my commandments and decrees. We see God's mercy played out time and time again. And that can give us confidence that sometimes we will misstep, sometimes we will stumble. Potentially we're completely off the tracks. But through the amazing hope we have in Jesus, we have a way back, and God's mercy is there for us should we seek it. So it just gives these amazing insights in this golden thread that we pick up of God's mercy throughout the Bible. This is the graphic. You probably can't see it very well. This work was done in 97. Someone tried to heat map the goodness and the badness of kings. What I like about this is you also see the contemporary prophets that were sent to which king. You're not going to see that very well. But what's interesting to see is the different prophets that sometimes one prophet was sent to both Israel and Judah. Other times there was just one to deal with a certain issue. And you see here Israel not going as long in the timeline as Judah, and we'll cover that off very shortly, by the Assyrian invasion. So basically just bad king after bad king after bad king. Eventually God's had enough, and he's like, that's it. And he sends the Assyrian nation, which was the world power at the time, before the Babylonians, and he takes them captive. Now, the Assyrians were nasty. They were just absolutely horrendous. They were the first people to really have large-scale siege machines, so their engineering was quite good, but they were absolutely ruthless. They would skin people alive, they would put them on stakes, a really, really horrible period of time. And the Israelite kingdom fell in 722 because they just would not repent. They would not come back to God, and eventually God took them into captivity using the Assyrians. Now, have you ever heard the term the 10 lost tribes? So the 10 tribes really lost their identity while they're in captivity, different to Judah, which we'll find out next week, where Judah really withheld its identity and came back as a people. The 10 tribes of Israel, I've read different stories. You really can't find someone that can trace their lineage strongly back to these 10 tribes. They really lost their way. Which brings us to the kingdom of Judah. So kingdom of Judah, once again, good and bad kings. As a nation, it lasted 340 years, so that's 120 years longer than Israel, and concluded in 586 BC. The history of Judah was a mixture of prosperity and adversity. Words of King Asa rang true, which was a faithful king. 2 Chronicles 15 verse 2, and he went out to meet Asa and said to him, "Hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you, but if you forsake him, he will forsake you." That was God's words to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai, where if you follow my statutes, if you follow my laws, if you actively seek me, I will be with you. But if you don't, I will depart from you. And you can see that play out all throughout the Jewish history. The Assyrians invade Judah. They have a go, so they've just captured Israel. They're like, let's move south and let's go after Judah as well. And we've actually got this story recorded in the Bible where 185,000 lay dead the next morning as an angel of the God spared them when King Hezekiah prayed. So pretty incredible. So just to finally populate our timeline, this is the last one for the session today. The Assyrian captivity is finished. And like I said, the 10 tribes of Israel, we call them the lost tribes of Israel. They never really properly came back as a whole. So that's it for session 4. It brings us at a really interesting time to next week. But summary of session 4, we looked at the period of the judges, like I said, roughly 400 years. Looked at the kings, Saul, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, and all the kings that came after that. We looked at Saul, the third great promise. So once again, beautiful golden theme playing through 2 Samuel 7, verses 11 to 16. I encourage you, if you haven't got that marked up in your Bible, have a look at that more closely and just have a look at those reoccurring themes in that golden thread. Solomon built the temple. We looked at the divided kingdom, Israel and Judah, the prophets, and the captivity. And next week, we have a really exciting week. Really looking forward to it. It's the captivity. So when Nebuchadnezzar invades and takes Judah captive for 70 years, it's foretold to Babylon. And then they come back, rebuild Jerusalem, and then we look at the period of the 400 years of silence leading up to Jesus Christ's birth in the New Testament. And we'll go into some detail about Alexander the Great. He came in, really fulfillment of Bible prophecy found in Daniel. And that's what that image there is. It's the Nebuchadnezzar's image, which we'll find out more about next week. So if I can just leave a bit of a hook, it's a great week. Please join us for next week's session as well. Thank you very much.